thanks everyone for joining. This is our I think this is our first official webinar. Very happy to see a bunch of familiar folks. I will share that before we get into things. Oh yeah, I want to say that there will be a draw at the end of this for a flower arrangement to be delivered to your door. We know HR can be lonely. We can feel underappreciated at times, and this is just a simple, small token that we see you, we hear you, and we appreciate you. The recording of this, we are recording this, I believe, right? Yes, we are. This will be sent to you afterwards, of course. And I guess I should also introduce myself. Hey, I'm Lee. Oh yeah, we've got slides for this. Founder of Aboard. We help companies onboard and train their new employees. And today I'm excited to share that we have Samantha. I met Samantha 2 or 3 years ago through this whole Aboard journey, and we instantly became best friends, and we just love good conversation, specifically around a number of different people ops topics. So Samantha, say hello, tell us who you are, and what are these handles you're sharing, this TikTok?
My effort to stay relevant with the younger generations, Lee, because I feel like if you don't stay on board with tech, you very quickly lose it. And I don't want to be that person. So here I am. And so, I mean, essentially, hi, everybody. As Lee said, good friends, colleagues at one point as I supported Aboard. And I put up with a lot with him and he puts up with a lot with me. And that's why this friendship is so beautiful. So to introduce myself, as it says here, I'm the founder of a business called Culture Dynamic, which is a consulting business specifically for startups, businesses looking for, on some sides, fractional HR consulting. I don't think I'll ever be able to fully get away from doing traditional HR, but mostly it's for companies that are fully distributed and they have people throughout the globe who are working together on different types of teams and they need support in leveraging those cultural differences. And so really it comes down to, how do you make your culture a bit more dynamic? It's with a Q because I'm based in Montreal. And so this gets me through the language laws pretty quickly. And then in terms of the two social media links, this I had asked Hebron to put these on because I'm starting to build that persona out a little bit more. It's a lot of fun. To give you all a bit more background on myself, I'm actually an anthropologist. So I did not start off in the business world or in HR, but then I very quickly found that there was a lot of carryover from anthropology into the business world as you look at whether it's the way you do user testing, the way you do marketing, or in my case, the way you do people operations. And so the startup anthropologist is really my way of sharing really more niche anthropological information with the world and how it applies to their day-to-day work life. It's kind of a passion project, so feel free to go check it out. But otherwise, yeah, that's, I guess, me is I call myself a business anthropologist. I was saying to Lee earlier, I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to brand myself. I think a lot of people don't necessarily know what business anthropology is. So ping me after, I'm happy to talk more about it. But I guess I would consider myself more of a cultural consultant in that sense, or a culture expert, both inside of the business and then abroad with more kind of the different regional cultures.
Lovely. Thank you, Samantha. Throughout this webinar, how they call it, please feel free to submit questions. I highly encourage you to submit questions. If you've been to one of the Aboard events before, I'm not a fan of people speaking to people. I love when people are just having good conversation and it's a discussion. So please submit questions. You could submit them to everyone, or you could submit them to, you can DM them or something, I think. Send those throughout and we will bring them up. The goal of this discussion today is walking away from this, I want you to feel energized, empowered, and feeling like that you're not alone. There is this notion of HR and people ops kind of feeling alone a lot of the time because we typically have to deal with a lot of the can I swear? The shit. So wanted to bring together this community and have great discussion. So we have some big questions on deck. The first one we're starting with, by the way, we're gonna start with one question, and then you're gonna get to vote on the second question. So what's the first question there, Cabron, that we're gonna kick things off with? Let's go to the next one. Yes, here we go. This is number one. And Samantha is gonna obviously kick it off, but if anyone wants to just chime in, let's hear it as well. So Samantha, you worked in like a formal or a proper HR role before getting into consulting. Then when you were doing consulting, you worked with a handful of different founders. So how have you been able to convince the executive team that you're not just a cost center? And maybe I should highlight, HR traditionally has been seen as this cost center of they're spending money and they're being compliant and what have you. But that's obviously been changing as time comes. And so we're in this like unique sort of transition period. So back to this question, Samantha, let's hear it.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think probably to start it off, I should start with my very first experience with HR that was not in an HR capacity myself. It was working when I was still living in BC, and I worked at City Hall in one of the kind of suburbs of Vancouver. And I remember knowing or kind of learning that if HR knew your name, it essentially meant that you had been blacklisted. And so if like you're walking down the halls and somebody from HR was like, "Oh, hi, Samantha," you're instant, like you just shudder and your skin fills with fear. And you just go into this, I'm waiting for that other shoe to drop and for somebody to come and talk to me because I did something wrong. And sure enough, I ended up getting an infraction, which just one infraction, I know for me, if any of you know me, is quite the talent. But I got an infraction because I showed up, I was early to work. And I was wearing kind of like a string tank top, and then I had a cardigan as well, but I had just been walking from the bus. So I didn't have my cardigan on. And it was before City Hall was open to the public and all of these types of things. And somebody from HR saw me, and my manager ended up calling me into their office and said, "Look, HR noticed that you were dressed inappropriately." And I said, "Well, can you explain to me what about my outfit at this point wearing my cardigan? What is inappropriate?" And she said, "Oh, something about straps." And I said, "Well, yes, when I was walking from the bus, I was in that situation, but now that I'm in the actual office space ready to work, I am dressed appropriately." And so it was from that moment that I ended up actually having a big fear of HR, a huge amount of disdain towards the entire department, feeling like a department that's supposed to be there to support your journey is actually there to kind of get in your way, but also to sabotage you and kind of create toxicity. So at that point, I wanted to use anthropology. I had just finished my degree. I was kind of like young, green, really excited about all of this. I didn't know how. And with these kinds of experiences, I started to realize that there is a huge component of HR that needs to be changed. And very similarly in anthropology as well, there's a very gross history that comes with anthropology. And so I kind of embarked on this mission to be like, how can we actually change the perception? So now going to present day, working with teams, the first thing that I've realized is in people ops, we have a lot of jargon. And we kind of, because I think we run in circles with other people ops people, we forget that other people outside of our teams or our departments don't know this jargon necessarily or don't relate to it. And so I find it's really easy when I was first starting off as people ops in different tech companies to just go in and start talking about all of these different tools and programs and initiatives and things that were really important. And the exec team, that's where they start to just see dollar signs in front of their eyes that are just kind of like falling into a trash bin because they're like, this people ops person or this HR person just expects me to spend a ton of money on all of these different programs. Can't they see we're trying to run a business? And so once I actually realized that and was able to tune into it, that's when I started to change my language. So I didn't change anything else about my approach. It was really just the language that I used. And I started paying attention to, okay, when the head of finance starts bringing things up, or when the head of marketing or when the head of sales starts bringing things up, what are the terms that they're using to speak to the CEO, who ultimately in a lot of cases was my decision maker? What are the terms and expressions and forms of speech that they're using in order to get this buy-in? And I kind of started to replicate this. In doing that, then all of a sudden people open up, right? Because it's suddenly not about, oh, well, there's just a bunch of expenses and we don't see how it's contributing. Instead, it's, hey, here's some data that's demonstrating why this is going to be really valuable. Or, hey, here's a quick spreadsheet, because you love those, showing you how much money you're actually spending a year because you don't have these initiatives. And so actually it ends up being more cost effective for your business if you do these things and kind of follow these recommendations than in the long run. And I realized they weren't able to see kind of that long term. They were just looking at the short term. So connecting those dots for them actually went like a really, really long way in getting that buy-in and ultimately that backing.
Okay, I have a couple of follow-ups, but I'm curious to see if anyone else has a question before I ask. Or has like an experience or story that they sort of pivoted their approach or changed their approach when speaking to the executive team about asking for money. No? Lauren, hey Lauren. We found success by storytelling and tying our cultural behaviors to the experience for the employee. Wow, that is fantastic. Very cool, Lauren. Thanks for sharing. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'd love to hear a more concrete, like, what's an example?
Hey everyone, how's it going?
Welcome, Lauren. Tell us more.
Yeah, so I wasn't expecting to speak to a bunch of people today, but my name's Lauren. I work at Click. I'm the learning program manager, and I head up our onboarding program. So a big thing for us over the last few years has definitely been storytelling and putting our senior leaders in the actual shoes of the experience that we're trying to sell. Whether that's a leadership conference or bringing back in-person onboarding or even like virtual onboarding, I think like 2 years ago, and really kind of honing in on what that looks like, but also what does that feel like? And those feelings we always try to bring back to our cultural behaviors, because that's the Click story and that's kind of the Click way. And when we're able to tie those back, we can make those connections. And senior leaders really, really love that at Click. And it's been really successful for us in trying to get money for in-person onboarding or for hosting a leadership conference or even for implementing new platforms, products, and that kind of stuff. So it's been really successful for us at Click.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lauren, for sharing. That's super helpful. And that answered one of my questions that I wrote while Samantha was speaking. How do you show the value in like an event offsite? Like, how do you show that return on investment? My other question before we sort of pick the next question, because we're already getting close on time here. Samantha, did it not scare you away from HR, that experience? Like, were you not like, oh, I'm not, okay, that's definitely not for me? Or how did you get back into that?
Yeah, I think this has a lot to do with my personality, where I'm very stubborn and I'm very much that kind of person. I kind of like run towards conflict in a lot of ways, which my family has learned to deal with quite lovingly. But for me, it was, okay, I see these people doing a terrible job at something that could be done so much better. Like, challenge accepted was kind of where I was coming from. And again, because I had spent, my degree learning about how anthropology like everybody had such a sour taste in their mouth with anthropologists. For me, it was, I want to change that because I see all the good that it can do. And so it was quite similarly, there's the whole, like, if you can't beat them, join them. And I was like, great, but I'm going to join them, but I'm going to be a Trojan horse type of situation. And I'm just going to absolutely disrupt from the inside of things. So in that situation, it didn't scare me. I think my bigger concern was, how do you get into HR if you don't have that background, and are they going to respect me for that? But I think that's another conversation. But in terms of actually seeing the, whether or not I wanted to be a part of that animal, for me, it was just like, I don't think this animal should be allowed to exist in the first place. So I'm just going to do my best to at least make sure that there are some employees out there who didn't have the same experience with people ops that I did from the get-go.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, sick. We have to go to the next question. This is a choose your own adventure webinar. Again, I hate the word webinar, but this is a choose your own adventure. So you have to choose between number 2 or number 3. Number 2 is, what unexpected hats have you had to wear that you never anticipated wearing in an HR or people role? Or number 3, What does professionalism mean in 2023? So number 3 and number 2, throw it in the chat. Wow. Okay.
Love this.
Number 2 is a clear winner. Professionally.
Well, number 3 would be hilarious. But what we can do, I know Lee and I were talking about doing we'll talk about this afterwards, but number 3 we can revisit at another point because I agree. Hilarious.
We really need to revisit because I texted Samantha last week about something specific and we haven't been able to talk about it yet. So, and I want to talk about it openly. Yeah. Okay. Number 2, what unexpected hats, Samantha.
Let's do it.
And by the way, if anyone else is out there who wants to share, think about this, and would love to hear it from you as well.
Yeah,
we could do a whole.
Yes, what unexpected hats. I like that. I saw Lauren, being a therapist, definitely. The most unexpected hat that I've had to wear is actually being a language. It's not even a therapist. I don't know what you would call it, like a language counselor, I guess, in that sense. So working with a number of startups in Quebec, there are a lot of people who are francophones on the team, and then you end up working in bilingual teams. And so there are some people who are just not super comfortable in English working with their team. And I ended up having an executive on one team who was heavily francophone. And he really he felt like he wasn't getting buy-in. He was the CTO, and he was like, I feel like I can't get buy-in when I talk, people don't fully understand what I'm saying because my accent's really heavy and all these kind of things. So we actually set up weekly meetings where I helped him do speech exercises to start perfecting his accent, to kind of working on, how he communicates certain things, to be able to speak more slowly. And like, when I say like exercises, I actually this is before ChatGPT was a thing. This was like 4 years ago. I wish I had had it, but I actually had to use Google, believe it or not, and find a bunch of resources, games that we played and everything like that. So on a weekly basis, I was doing that. Otherwise, yes, also therapist is a big one. I think a lot of people kind of come to you for that and have a lot of questions. But interestingly enough, it's often not just about work stuff. Like, I've had people who have come to me and then start talking, and I'm sure a lot of you can resonate, where people actually start talking about really big personal things. Some of them can be really funny. Like, I've had people talk about, things that are happening in their personal life, and you just sit there and you're like, oh my gosh, you should write a book because this is hysterical, but also I'm so sorry, and let me see how I can help. So therapy is another one. In terms of other hats that I've worn that I didn't anticipate wearing, I think the other thing that I want to dive into, because I am such a big advocate for this, is just the idea that every person who joins a people ops team, especially when you're the only person joining, like if you don't have a team and you're kind of the only HR person or people ops person, there's this expectation that you're a one-stop shop for literally everything that could possibly touch people operations. So you're expected to be a payroll specialist, you're expected to be an onboarding specialist, you're expected to be a learning and development, a DE&I, like all of these types of things. And then when you don't necessarily know how to do that, people kind of look at you and they're just like, And then I've had people actually go to comments about, well, like, how much experience do you have, or these types of things. I'm like, whoa, this has nothing to do with my years of experience. I could be working for 60 years and have only touched 2 different sides of people ops. And do you actually want somebody who is good at all of these things? Because I don't believe that person exists. And I really think it's important to have a diverse team. So that's the other thing. Like, I have had to do payroll things. I have become an insurance broker and had to go to markets and negotiate different insurance contracts. I am a platform vetter on a regular basis. I've been a user tester. This is actually, here we go, Aboard. I never thought that I would be user testing. And I think, helping Lee and Evan is what brought on my realization that I really love being critical about people's project plans. But that's another one as an HR person. I never thought that somebody would reach out and be like, hey, can you, give us comments and critique our platform and our strategy. So those are my
and also guilty of reaching out to Samantha and asking for payroll help. But I have a couple follow-up questions. As someone more junior, like, how do you prevent from becoming that? I feel like even when I was in people ops, like I was saying, well, I think I'm going to answer my own question, but I was saying yes to everything. Like, yes, I can help with that. Yes, I can help with that. So how do you prevent from becoming that one-stop shop?
Yeah, I think at the very beginning of a career, I mean, you kind of do it because you're first trying to figure out your niche, right? It's like in med school, you don't specialize for the first little bit because you're still just trying to figure out the whole thing and what you want to do. So I would say in that sense, figure it out, but set yourself a timeline. Like say, okay, I'm going to spend the first 2 years of my career, or the first 6 months, or like whatever it, you want it to be. This is how much time I'm going to spend being more of that generalist, exploring things, putting my hand up for projects, taking on different things. Obviously respecting your time boundaries too. Like I'm not saying burn yourself out to get experience. I think that's completely unacceptable. But what I would say is just, set yourself that timeline to say, okay, I'm going to do this for a fixed amount of time. I'm going to learn and absorb as much as I can. And then actually like schedule it with yourself. Like I would say if any of you are there giving, younger people advice or whatever, or even to yourself or to your younger selves, if we ever discover time travel, but is to actually like put it on your calendar in 2 years from now to do a check-in with yourself and to just say, hey, what do I enjoy doing? Because I think like in any kind of domain in people ops, we end up getting so caught up in the day-to-day that we forget to do those check-ins. And so if it's on your calendar, you get to sit there and say, okay, I've been doing this for a year or two. I've been touching a ton of different places. What makes me the most excited? What are the tasks that are the easiest to perform? And those are probably the ones that you end up, swarming to, and then start looking for roles. Don't go looking for HR generalist roles, but look specifically. I think especially in this kind of era in 2023 and forward, there are so many fractional roles that fill people ops teams. So start looking for the ones that, that really resonate with you. Look on LinkedIn for people who already have those roles, reach out to them to understand more, like do some of that to bring yourself out. And I think it'll be a lot easier to kind of leave that HR generalist mindset a little bit.
Love that. Everyone go to their calendar, schedule something a year from now, 6 from now, but don't be too transparent with it because people can probably see your calendar. But put that as a reminder. I think that's awesome. I have one more quick question, one more follow-up. Samantha, if you could recommend a course or skill for a young junior HR people ops person to like improve upon, what would it be? Because you mentioned, or someone mentioned, communications. Yeah, Imran was talking about communications. There's this like, there's also this notion of like coaching. What would you recommend?
Honestly, it's not anything business related. It's going to come more to like self-work type of courses. It like as kind of maybe granola-y as that sounds. Again, for any of you who know me, I'm big into those kind of things. But for me, it's knowing how to set your boundaries, knowing how to protect your own energy. Like these things sound really silly, but again, like we've all pointed out, I think a number of people in the chat too, that we end up being the therapist, except that we're not therapists. Therapists spend a number of years in school learning how to protect themselves, learning how to release any of the heavy stuff that gets told to them. HR people don't. And then they go back into their workday and they continue to take on more and more and more. So for me, if I were to recommend a young person or anybody, honestly, like I need to do this myself, is to just spend more time learning. Maybe that means take a master class. Like that's usually where you find that information. It's not going to be on like Coursera or Udemy, but, learn from people about how to protect yourself, how to set boundaries, how to communicate effectively. I think especially like my experience as a woman in the workplace is like this whole idea around when you start to set boundaries, how does that get taken? Does it mean that you're not a team player? Does it mean that you're not engaged? Does it mean that like all of these types of things? And I think that's totally false. So the earlier on in your career, you can build up that confidence in, what you deserve, in, how you respect yourself and how others should respect you. I think that can go a long way in, in terms of career building and just being more successful overall.
Cool. Okay. And I want to share some of these comments because these are freaking great. Fleet management tracking, fuel usage. Oh yes. Comms expert. Laura also tend to be a guide. Okay. Problems, ops related. Emotional intelligence, understanding your emotions. Lauren, that's great. That's great. That's great. And Connor, mental health first aid.
Yeah, that's
that
awesome.
sounds interesting. I don't think I've heard of this. Connor, if you feel comfortable, I would love to hear a little more about this.
You're gonna put the unemployed guy on the spot for your webinar, Lee. I don't know that that's gonna hype many people up. They're listening to someone who can't find a job currently.
Oh, come on, Connor.
But
you're being choosy.
I'm so choosy. I'm the choosiest. In all seriousness, mental health first aid is a course. It's Canadian nationally approved. So I think it's like the Canadian Association of Mental Health is kind of the overarching organization. And then they have, centers around the country that put on the training. So I did it with a company they were based in Saskatoon. So it was pretty good for me to get a different perspective with a lot more Indigenous concerns. Different diversity elements were discussed that I don't think in Ontario we would have talked about the same things. And just like I said, I'm kind of alluding to this point of, especially early in my career, I started working in HR when I was still 20 in my first full-time job. And I had, parents coming to me stressed about balancing their life with 4 kids and their work life. And I'm sitting there like, I have literally no idea what to tell you. So I would get very anxious and very stressed whenever I knew those discussions were coming up. What the mental health first aid course really does is it just tells you what your role is. Your role is to listen, and it's to reassure people. And then it's, like I kind of alluded to redirect them to professional supports. Like Samantha mentioned, we're HR people, we're good listeners. We're not licensed mental health professionals. And it's really important, I think, for HR folks to know where that line is, because we are not going to solve every problem that an employee has. And that course was just really helpful for me in kind of understanding what my role is and how I can have a productive discussion without solving every problem in that 15-minute block.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Connor. Thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to include this in the follow-up. This is really important. So thanks again. I know we're at closing time. We wanted to keep it to 30 minutes because we know we're all busy. Cabron, do you have the winner for the flower arrangement? I'll give you a second I'll share a few remarks actually.
Okay, the winner is Casey Cover.
Oh, congrats, Casey. Do you want to come up and speak a few words? I'm just kidding. You don't have to. We'll
Thank you. I don't want to turn my camera on because I'm I'm working from home today, so I do not look. Thank you.
We'll reach out to you after, Casey, and we'll arrange that. Thanks so much for joining. One more thing, Samantha and I are thinking about continuing these discussions, potentially through these like LinkedIn. There's this fancy new thing called LinkedIn audio events. It's like Clubhouse. So we're thinking about taking some of these questions over to there, maybe like a weekly or bi-weekly thing. I don't know. We just love talking and we never find time to talk about stuff like this. So if you want to join us, that'd be cool. And if you have any questions that you think we should talk about, please message them to us because we'd love to talk. I love talking. So thanks everyone. Happy Thursday. Hope you enjoyed this.
Thank
and
you.
We'll see you online. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lee and Samantha. You guys are awesome.
Connor.
See you, Connor.
See you guys.
Bye.